So you're from Africa? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I totally come. Yeah, it's helping not working with my mail. I'm trying to so I hope for next time to will. Yes, that's good. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Oh, yes, thank you. Are these veggie? They are all veggie. Vegan, I don't eat. I don't eat I think this. Thank you. I have the right tattoos of them. My first time in Helsinki and I found it very interesting. They are very huge, a lot of space. Yesterday was beautiful weather, it was so cold, so it's a strange. It's like spring, like March. Late, but it doesn't. Yes, I was cold. All right. I don't think I'm killing you. All right.
Moi. Täällä treeni menossa.
Moi. Moi.
Hauska nähdä. Mitä kuuluu? Onko sulla joku talonrakennus?
Joo. Vähän toiveessa, että mä ensi vuonna rakentaisin tommosen vierastalon. Yes, mä tulen.
Kaikki on aika selvä. Mä luulen, että tuolla takarivissä oli ne ruoka.
Okei.
Klassikko.
Tää oli ilmeisesti sun mikki.
Ehkä se on. Tätä mä en tiedä. Ja onko se aina päällä vai?
Se on päällä.
Eli nyt, jos mä nyt rupean puhumaan vähän, niin sieltä kuuluu jotain.
Sä voit kysyä, hän on tuossa valvomassa.
Hel.
Onko tää sun kone? Haluatko sä pitää sen?
Se on ton Katin kone meidän tiimistä. Annetaan sen olla vaan siinä varmaan.
Okei. Joo, mä mietin vaan, että otaks mä tän mikrofonikin tonne ton klikkerin kanssa.
No ota vaan. Joo, se on ihan hyvä.
Joo.
Ja toi on siis sen takia, kun tosta ohjataan screen.
Hetki.
recently. It's nice to get away and be with like-minded people. Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah. Wait, how about you? I bet. There are a lot of UN people here. Yeah, it's so nice to relax and not have to sell somebody on something, right? I think we all need that in our roles, right? You need to be with like-minded people every once in a while to recharge your batteries. It's not so much the trip, but the time. Yesterday afternoon. Yeah. I brought this cup so I can drink coffee continuously the whole day. 7, maybe in the East Coast.
He's here. Yes. Yes.
I didn't realize how much I was
Tell me what to do.
Joo. Joo. Eli mä selittää sun tästä tapauksesta. On moderaattori Tuuli, joka on takkien valkoinen paita, jota oli just nyt tässä. Hän toimii moderaattorina, hän aloittaa tämän. Ja sitten hän valkopaitainen nainen tulee, on niin keynote-puhuja. Ja hän puhuu tommosen 20 minuuttia tossa. Ja sen jälkeen tulee paneelikeskustelu. Paneelisti keskustelee näistä X. Ja sen jälkeen se kestää puoli tuntia. Sitten tulee roundtable, eli näissä pöydissä käydään keskustelua. Tää kestää yhteensä 1,5 tuntia.
Joo, okei. Haluatko, että teen jotain?
Ei.
Sanot, jos on jotakin sitten jopa.
Ei mitään. What you?
Ei mulla ole tapana puhuja. Semmoiset peruskäyttäytymistä varmaan. Kyllä.
Hey.
I think there are people saying that.
Yeah. Leave that. Sorry, I kind of couldn't hear you.
I just need to charge my computer. Is there
Charge your computer. Okay.
there should be a connection somewhere, I guess.
There's not electric tables.
Well, I need to sneak out, so I don't want to join one of the tables because I
Okay.
won't be able to.
There might be some over there. You can see that eggs here. There's some chargers there.
It's all good.
Joo. Hän on moderaattori, joka taisi just. Meillä on siis äänimies takana, jos tulee mitään suurempia ongelmia. Sen verran, no hei, sen mä voin näyttää sulle.
One night here. Mostly, yes. It's an experience, definitely. I recently graduated.
exactly what we wanted, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You can follow. Is this going to be live stream?
Yeah, this is the live stream.
Do we know how many people are watching?
I have no idea. I'm just a host, not a technician. Actually, I am a technician. I work with lights.
Okay. Okay, so you're going to dim the lights there, or you're going to do a disco ball? Or?
More like live lights. What I do normally is production coordination. But I do like, there was like 2 years of now to start again. I love this job.
Yeah, nice. So you are employed here by the Finlandia house, or?
No, I'm working for the company called Nova.
Meillähän onkin väkeä kuin pipoa. Niin sanotaan. Hyvältä näyttää. Aina se jännitys, että tuleeko tupa täyteen. Mitäs näille ihmisille sanotaan, kun ei enää mahdu mihinkään? Et menkää niihin muihin.
Niin, en mä tiedä, aletaanko me ajaa ihmisiä pois. Varmaan ymmärtää, että jos ei pöytiin mahdu.
Otetaan vaan se minuutti sitten vielä.
No niin, on minuutti.
Dear friends, super warm welcome to this event, and I'm so happy that we end up seeing more and more and more of rows of people there. So let's try to find seat for most of us, and then you know it's good for your health if you need to stand a little bit. So it's part of the sustainable lifestyles probably. We have 1.5 hours to have a deep dive into the question of sustainable production and consumption. And if I bring like my key idea from the morning or the starting session, I think the aim for this conference was put quite high. And as this is one of the first sessions, probably we should put our aim also quite high. Our duty for next 1.5 hours is to have a look at how, not more, not less, than to solve the question of sustainable production and consumption, one of the sustainable development goals that presents us the question of how to make sure that these things will be solved in the future. And of course in the context of circular economy, but as the circular economy is a little bit more takes a look at from the production side, it tells us how to use in production things that of course comes from somewhere else, but it's little bit more organized by the production. Today we will take a little bit more point of view from the consumption side. And of course it's super difficult question. On production side, we still have some opportunities to create regulation and all of that. On consumption side, it's quite a lot of what do I want and what do you want and what do they want and why don't they want to do those and that kind of things. Of course, we have legislative opportunities and others as well, but it's a lot of individual decisions, it's a lot of lifestyles, and those are the topics we are discussing today. My name is Tuuli Kaskinen, and I'll be moderating this 1.5 hour and trying to keep us with our Thai schedule. This event has been organized by 10-year framework program from United Nations, and it has 6 programs under it, and you will learn much about that. And why we are talking about that is that that's actually a structure through which we can have a look at how these circular economy questions can be solved. So I hope that in the end of this discussion, when you bring your ideas in the roundtable discussions, they are such that also can be used by this program and by its resources and by the people who already work with those topics. So the idea is that this brings a lot of insight to those discussions. There are more than 500 partners in these 6 programs. It's kind of first global program for these topics. So from that point of view, it's really collective impact we are looking for in this session. There are 2 ways to participate. One is, of course, the Twitter, to use the hashtag of the whole conference. You remember it's the hashtag WCEF2017. And through that, we also make also people who are not in this room to participate. So that's great way. And then we also have this wall here. You can use your internet connection from your computer or from your phone and go to the web address screen.io/demos. And in there you can send messages to this wall. So during our keynote and panel discussions, whatever comes into your mind, please use that. And then also the roundtable discussions will be reported through that. So I think that's it. We will start with a keynote speech, a keynote by someone who is actually my idol for a long time, and I'm super happy to have her here. She has a distinguished diplomatic career in sustainable development and humanitarian aid. She's the director of global research organization WRI, Europe and Africa's office. And she also leads WRI's engagement in the post-2015 development agenda. She will give us inspiration, knowledge, probably something else as well. It's Kitty van der Heijden. Welcome.
Thanks. And, I'm exceedingly happy to see all of you. This is amazing. Because 20 years ago, when we started to discuss this was not a natural thing to discuss. This was something that was still very controversial, and it took us bloody well 20 years to deliver the 10 years program. And for you, this may be like the natural thing, right? Circular, organic, think about what you buy. When we started this discussion, it was called the green economy in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. Very long. So the abbreviation was GETSPD, which in my language, I'm Dutch, is remarkably similar to GETSI, which is roughly the same as, we don't want to deal with this. Because those in the affluent communities didn't want anybody to talk about their lifestyles. And those in the developing world thought, who are these Westerners telling us to change our lifestyles? We still need to grow out of poverty. And the only reason we got there after 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears in rooms with no daylight was this. This is our model of circular economy. As we grow, as we develop, we take, make, and we waste, and we basically destroy everything we depend on as mankind and as a human Earth system. And, I don't give a damn whether you call it green economy or circular economy or resource efficiency or resource productivity. It is all about the same thing. It is all about how do we live in harmony with nature's earth system, and how do we do that in a way that all of us as humanity share in the well-being that we can create. Because, honestly speaking, I come from a think tank that deals largely with the biophysical domains, land, water, carbon. In my domain, there's nothing circular. Beautiful music, but not mine. Dramatic drum beat, right? This is what I see in everything I deal with. There's nothing circular to it. This is radical exploitation of the earth resources. This is eating ourselves out of a future rather than into a healthy human being. Whether it's carbon, whether it's soil degradation, any natural phenomenon that we look at, this is essentially what we're doing. And we're depriving not just ourselves and Mother Earth, but particularly those that still have to grow out of poverty, of a future in dignity. And I think that is impossible. That's because we are still driven by consumption. United States per capita consumption. I live here, all the way in the bottom, Ethiopia. Ethiopia's population will double by 2050, from 100 to 200 million. That country here, right next, Nigeria, bottom of the consumption chart, by 2050 will take over the United States as the third largest country by population numbers. Just imagine, we're only seeing the beginning of what we're doing. We are already in deficit. We're in red in many, many ways. Our ecological footprint, you can see where it is. The darker the color, the bigger our footprint. And that's one problem. We can do something about that, all of us here in this room. But the bigger problem is that everybody who doesn't live the way we live wants to have the same thing as we have. And because isn't it damn comfortable to buy new clothes every time you see something, to have faraway holidays, to have a nice car, to eat what you want. And we cannot deprive other people of that same future, but they're trying to do exactly the same as we do. So something has got to give. Where are we going to find tomorrow's market in a sustainable way, rather than in the way we're doing it now? What's the role of business in getting us there? Now, you know as well as I do, if you're a CEO, what gets you your bonus? Selling more stuff. If you're a politician, what gets you re-electing? Enabling the citizens to buy more stuff. What gets you social recognition? Buying the latest gadget. It is all related to consumption. And if you then have a look at where that's going, the yellow here is population numbers. We're going to go through 9 billion by 2050. But the bigger problem is that consumption by far outstrips population growth, because we're all going to consume a heck of a lot more. And that, in a way, is a very positive development. Let's be very honest about that, because that is these countries that are now developing, that are still called the developing world, which will grow out of poverty. It's exactly what we want, is in accordance with the SDGs. We want economic growth, we want equity, and we want environment. But the way we're doing that, guys, it's not sustainable. Over the years, we're going to triple resource use, and we're already in a deficit. There's only one conclusion. I'm Dutch, so I can be honest to the point of being rude. This is the conclusion. It's an amazing, amazing thing to me that, without the intention to do so, as humanity in less than a century, we have altered the properties of an entire planet's atmosphere without the intention to do so. We've engineered ourselves into a problem. We are losing now between 150 and 200 species each day, something that very few people realize. Kind of amazing, right, for a bunch of fur-free apes? So, if we look at the future, it definitely has to be about something else than what we are now. Sustainable consumption and production is going to be in the middle. I didn't make a ball because we are really literally at a tipping point here between making sure that everybody is fed, has a job, and can grow a life of dignity, and between earth systems on which we all depend. And because it's world Environment Day, I want to focus on something that we all do every day, and that's consume food. Now, the coming years, we're going to have to produce 70% more food than we do now. That is an agricultural productivity in Greece that is higher than any time in the past 40 years, and there ain't a whole lot of forest left that we can cut. We're also going to have to do that in a way that will be radically different than today, right? Because agriculture and land use change, it's a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions, it takes up 70% of freshwater resources, and it takes up a huge amount of land mass. And so it's 9 billion with less of a footprint. And then we have between 30 and 50% of crop yields that will go down because of climate, precisely in those areas where we can ill afford it. So that's quite a conundrum, right? And there are solutions that you actually as an individual, as a company, can do something about. We did a research on how do we get to that 70% of increase in food calories. Now part of that, that's the blue wedge, is in production. I'm not going to talk about that. And part of it is just reducing consumption. I'm going to take 2 examples to show you where we can all be part of the solution rather than the problem. Number 1, food loss and waste. This is amazing, right? 1 in 9 people still goes to bed hungry. And as humanity, we're throwing away 1/3 of the food that is meant for human consumption. Just think what we are doing here. 1/3 of consumption. That means essentially we would grow every hilltop flatland in China, take a torch and burn it to the ground, and all the rest you let it wither away. That's what we're doing. That's a pretty stupid thing to do, I would say, if there is still hunger. Now, where does that happen? This is South Africa, and you'll see it's largely here around handling and storage. And then we go here, and you'll see a difference. In America, 42% of food produced for human consumption ends up in the bin, because most of it is lost at the consumers. That's you and me throwing away food. That's restaurants, that is old people's home. In Europe, it is about half, but it's mostly at the level of consumers. That's you and me. Just look at the cost. Economically, if you're in business, there's a good business case of addressing that. This is the global price tag per family. It's about $1,600 US a year. You can save that and save the planet. Because if food loss and waste were a country, of course it's not, but imagine food loss and waste were a country, it would bloody well be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, just after China and the United States. So what you consume, how you consume, and how much you throw away actually makes a real difference. This is 8% of greenhouse gas emissions. And, you know, just to make sure that you understand where we are, if we want to have a 66% chance of keeping temperature rise below 1.5 degrees, we have about 4 years left. 66%. Yeah? This also includes a 1.8% chance that we actually go to 6 degrees temperature rise. Now you may say, who came here with an airplane? Hands up. A 1.6% risk of global temperature rise of 6% equates, if you do that in airline terms, in the amount of air flights from A to B that we do as humanity each day, it would mean 1,500 fatal accidents each day. At the moment, we have 30 planes coming down each year. So that is not something to toss with. We have to take action. Another part of the consumption wedge, shifting to more sustainable diets. Again, this is something you can do something about as an individual, as a corporation, and as a policymaker. Why? Because actually, if you take cattle nation, all the cattle in the world, we are using about a quarter of the land earth mass. It uses about 33% of water. It's the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter. Had cattle been a nation after China and the United States, I'm pretty sure they would like to reduce beef consumption. But it's actually going to grow by 95% because people, as they grow into more affluent, they change their consumption behavior. So is there something we can do about that? Is it all going to be dramatic? Are we all going to lose our jobs and economic growth? No. This is the average US diet. Agricultural land use, greenhouse gas emissions. A shift to a Mediterranean diet already makes a huge difference. Just imagine saving 11% of greenhouse gas emissions. I'm not asking everybody to become a vegetarian here, not at all. If you would shift from beef to pork and poultry, 14% of greenhouse gas emissions. And I can go on and on and on. There are solutions that we can make in the here and now, and not just because of carbon, because everybody talks about carbon, and I think we're getting it. This is plant-based protein, animal-based protein. Pork, eggs, fish, poultry, dairy. What's going through the roof? Beef. Not just because of carbon. Look at the blue one. Woo! Water use. So you think water is a given, right? Water, what's the problem with water? Well, there's a huge problem with water. It's a much more near-term risk than carbon. We're going to get thirsty before we get hot. China, India, where it's grey, there's no irrigated agriculture of any significance. Where it's red, you have a problem. Already, almost 40% of irrigated agriculture, the stuff that you have on your plate, the cotton that is in your t-shirt, is at risk. This is just 10 years from now. Water not a problem? Water is a huge, huge problem. We tend to forget that energy is also a very, very water-intensive commodity. So here you see in blue hydropower plants, in rusty brown it is thermal power plants. 1 in 5 power plants in this region is in an area of water stress. Look at what's going to happen in the near future, because demand is growing. And a large part of that demand ends up at your table, in the products that you buy, in the energy embedded in everything you consume. And what about these guys? Do you think that anybody is going to listen to these guys when we have to divide scarce resources like water or carbon? No. So we have to start looking at our own footprint. And while politicians start to plan for hardware and infrastructure, when it comes to water, just don't want to know, just, God will save us. Well, it's not going to save us for long. If there's any hope I have, it's not very much in the politicians, I'll be honest. It's in the private sector. This is a question that the World Economic Forum asks from the corporate leaders every year. What keeps you up at night? What is the single biggest risk to your business continuity in the next 18 months? And you see essentially what Achim Steiner said, the global inbox. It's migration, it's state collapse, it is all those things that are now the headlines. And you ask that same question, what keeps you up at night? What is the single biggest risk for your business continuity 10 years from now? And now we're talking water, climate change, extreme weather event, food crisis, and largely as a result of that, global instability. This is something that we can still do today. Tomorrow starts now, or whatever the phrase was that was used. We are seeing across the private sector aggressive action to get it done, not just because they want to mitigate those risks, but also in no small part because it's simply economically rational. This is where innovation is coming. This is what drives new business models. Now, I'm also a commissioner at Unilever. The sustainable brands grow 50% faster than the other brands. There's a good business case to do it. And actually, the investors community is rewarding that. If you look at the S&P 500, the climate leaders simply have all the economics that speak for themselves. It's not just risk mitigation. It is trying to grab that opportunity that is in a new business model that we need for planet Earth. Now, most countries still take Paris very seriously. Science very clearly tells you what the bloody problem is. And okay, there are some that look more at tweets and voting intentions. But by and large, except for 3, even the public sector is still playing ball when it comes to our global carbon perspective. So, in conclusion, this is a very complicated slide. I only want you to remember one thing. As you move from 2007 to 2017, this again is the World Economic Forum, you'll see that in global risks in terms of likelihood, so how likely is a certain risk to emerge, And global risks in terms of impact. How will it impact your business continuity, your entire business model? What you'll see, a lot of blue in the start, and that is a slowing Chinese economy, it is oil and gas, it is an asset price collapse. And as you move, you see it's increasingly green. It's risk and opportunities that is embedded in climate change, in a water crisis, in soil degradation, in extreme weather, and how we defend ourselves to everything that we are doing to Mother Nature. And the old model that we have of consumption-driven growth is going to come to a grinding halt, because we cannot consume our way into happiness, and we cannot consume our way out of climate change anymore. We're going to have to radically rethink how much we consume, what we consume, and how we share that with others across the planet. And while the private sector is getting it when it comes to circular economy and resource efficiency and resource productivity, there's one thing that I think we still need to do, and that is looking at consumption. Consumption is not being discussed. If you extrapolate what we're doing, we're not just wrecking the planet. We're wrecking the planet and ourselves. So the real elephant in the room is not about how do we do a little bit better, but it is how do we do enough for 9 billion within planetary resources. And so it's really time to address the elephant in the boardroom. Normalizing a conversation that we can't just keep on growing. As politicians, as CEOs, as individual citizens, we're going to have to rethink, and that means do the math. Can you meet your business with the resource constraints that we already have? Can you transform your business into a resource-constrained world? In other words, are you taking the 25-year lens to your business continuity? And let me see a show of hands. Who wants change in this room? I want you to think hard before you say yes to the next slide. Because that's what you're going to have to discuss. We can all do this. We can all make that change happen. It's not enough to realize that we have a problem. It is important to lead by example. And very often I see that people think, oh, but these problems, they're so big, I can't deal with them. You know, I live in Africa. I live in the most beautiful country in Africa. It's Ethiopia. And there's an old African proverb, and sometimes when I get depressed, I think of that. And it says, if you think you are too small to make a difference, go and sleep in a bedroom with a mosquito. I wish you a good night.
Thank you so much, Kitty van der Heyden. I think this kind of leaded us quite nicely into where we are going. So remember your hands up and hands up again. And thank you for all these very, very nice questions and answers here. Kitty, I just would like your comment on these two. There was this easy question. Will taking out stuff out of our growth goals, will that do the trick? Is that like enough? And then there was an answer. Yes, we can take stuff out and still grow. We need new business models for resale, sharing, repairing, and etc. Do you agree? Is there something to add? Do you agree with this answer to this question? The beginning of the question.
I think it's... sorry, I'm in the light. It's a yes and no world. Does it help to get circular, to look at resource efficiency, at resource... productivity, of course. I mean, it's a big part of that wedge. Huge. But in the end, we're going to have to question what our economic model is. And is it feasible that as 9 billion people with a certain lifestyle that keeps us all out of poverty with the prospect of a dignified life, that we can just think that we can all do that in the same way? My answer to that is, I don't know if that's feasible. It depends on how much... in the affluent world, we're ready to reconsider our consumption habits to ensure that those people that still need to grow out of poverty really get a chance to do that in a resource-constrained world that, by biophysical limits, simply has no flexibility. Right? So you can be very flexible when it comes to resource efficiency, but some of the planetary boundaries are pretty hard. and there's very little alternative. So I think it is really about how do we become agile enough to create new business models that ensure growth, ensure prosperity, but within planetary boundaries.
Thank you so much. Warm applause again. And to be agile enough, I think there are many people in this room who are leading those kind of processes where we really need to fast up and make sure these things are happening. And now I'm inviting 6 of them to be our panel for next half an hour. So very warm welcome Gunilla Blomqvist, Mark Hidson, Harri Hakaste, Ulf Jeckel, Gabriele Kull, and Martin Rohr. And these are the people who are part of these 10 years framework programs, which are 6 programs that take exactly these questions up on very practical level. In these 6 areas where the sustainable consumption and production should be taken into account, and now we will have a quite fast jump into 6 perspectives to this topic. And we will start with Gunilla Blomqvist, who comes from the Swedish Ministry for the Environment and Energy, and who leads the program of lifestyles and education. So she's actually the one who is responsible of helping us to do all these tricks or something like that. Can you share us a little bit? What are you doing in that program, and compared to what are the challenges that Kitty posed to us? How is this 10-year framework program of education and lifestyles answering to those questions? Gunilla.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here and see so many people joining this session. I think we can agree that we need to change our consumption patterns. Sustainable consumption is a crucial and large part of the circular economy. And if you look at the actual circle of the circular economy, we know that it starts with the production of natural resources, continued with the production of products. But these products are supposed to be possible to repair, to upgrade, to reuse, recycle, and be remade into new products. And following consumption part is following the production part, and the consumption part is really needed to have some enabling structures in order to make the consumers, the individuals, households, but also public authorities and businesses to make the right things. So these enabling structures, it can be supportive infrastructure, it can be economic incentives, information, not at least education, new business models, and other tools. But without the sustainable consumption part, we will have no green economy, and vice versa, I would say. The program on sustainable lifestyles and education is co-led by Sweden and Japan. And the vision of the program is a world where sustainable lifestyles is desirable, accessible, and beneficial, and that sustainable lifestyles is the common norm.
And is that the thing in all over the world? Is it in developed and developing countries? How are these two sides or two point of views to this question? What Kitty already said, it's quite easy to say to us hey, try a little bit. But for someone who is really lacking the resources, how this question is dealt?
Well, the sustainable lifestyles looks different in different parts of the world. So that's why what we also are working on is to make the scenarios. What is sustainable lifestyles in different parts of the world? And the other part is to find the tools, the policies in different parts of the world that can help to change unsustainable consumption and lifestyles into sustainable ones.
What would be the most important thing you're doing in your program?
Well, we are actually focusing on this to find the tools, to develop the right policies, to find the incentives in order to change into sustainable lifestyles. The second part is education, to empower people, individuals, to actually change into sustainable lifestyles. And the third part is these scenarios, to show what is sustainable lifestyles in different parts of the world, and also to follow up and on the progress.
And create a vision, that's always needed as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we are happy to announce that we have at least 15 projects going on in different parts of the world. And they are on textiles, on waste, food waste, and also on how music can help changing lifestyles.
And that's important also. We need these cultural tools to encourage us a little bit. We always talk about like economical incentives and all of that, but that part is very important as well. But then we need to jump further on public procurement side. If Gunilla speaks about our behavior and lifestyle change, then Mark is the one to create structures together with public entities. So what is it about?
Yeah, well, not just me alone, of course. We're collaborative. I mean, with public procurement, the first thing to say is, of course, it's got huge potential, and that's what's been recognised for this demand-side policy. I mean, just take Europe itself alone. I think it's around 14% of the GDP, gross domestic product, is spent by public authorities. That's the equivalent to about 1.8 trillion euros per year, which is a huge amount of money. So what we're trying to do is influence what public authorities are buying. So typically at the moment, what public authorities are doing is that they're buying a product, using a product, and then disposing of a product. And you can say some of them are doing it sustainably. They're buying a printer, photocopier, and it's energy efficient. So you could say, well, we're ticking a box, we're sustainable. But of course, it's much more than that. And procurement can also do much more than that. It can influence how raw materials are being extracted. Is it being done by child or slave labour? How is the product being actually put together? How is it being transported to the public authority? You've got the use phase, of course, but then a huge area disposal phase. You don't just throw it away. You need to remanufacture it, reuse it, reprocess it. So it's a huge potential. So as part of the program that we're working on, we're going into more the circular procurement and taking it through the whole phase of that.
Yeah, and as we are here in Nordic countries, and this question is even more important for us because the public sector plays quite a big role in here. Yeah. So this is important part. These are the two kind of point of views, one from consumption and the other one from public procurement. And then, of course, the interesting question is what happens on the industry fields. And one of the biggest of them deals with buildings. And from Ministry of Environment here in Finland, which is, by the way, the co-organizer of this event, Harri Hakaste is the one who leads the program. And before we give the floor for Harri, we take a little bit look at a nice small video.
This video presents the themes of resource efficiency and circular economy in the construction sector, which is the #1 consumer of global raw materials. The use of buildings account for 40% of global energy, 25% of global water, 40% of global resources, and approximately 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions. Between 1900 and 2005, the global use of material resources increased by a factor of 8, almost twice as fast as the rate by which the global population grew, while the use of construction materials increased by a factor of 34. We have tremendous opportunities to better the efficiency of our use of resources. 10 to 15% of building materials are wasted during construction. 60% of European offices are not used even in working hours. 50% of residential dwellers report living in too much space. 20 to 40% of the energy used in existing buildings could profitably be conserved. 54% of demolition materials are sent to landfill, while in some countries landfill is only 6%. And 40% of all extracted materials are stored in the building environment, which provides an enormous reservoir for reuse and recycling. EU manufacturing could realize net cost savings of up to $630 billion annually in raw materials by deploying a circular economy approach, and approaching circular economy principles could significantly enhance the productivity of the global construction industry, saving at least $100 billion a year. The Sustainable Development Goals of the SBC program are to achieve a healthy building environment, provide capacity building to different stakeholders, increase water use efficiency, ensure access to affordable, reliable and modern energy services, improve resource efficiency, promote sustainable industrialization and foster innovation, support job creation to all genders and the youth, enhance the planning and management of sustainable human settlements, encourage companies to adopt sustainable practices, strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity, restore degraded land and ensure sustainable use of ecosystems, and finally, build on initiatives for knowledge sharing and cooperation. Our vision is a local circular economy to analyze global material flows to inform local networks and design buildings for material recovery, lower the cost of waste separation, replace energy-intensive materials and save raw materials, protect the informal sector and encourage the use of organic building materials. Invest in local circular economies and divert materials from landfill, and raise the value of reuse materials and improve the prospects for the informal markets. A good example of using
Quite amazing opportunities. Was it that the use of construction materials has increased 34 times, a factor of 34? Quite amazing thing. So, Harri, you have quite big industry to play with. What are you doing in practical level in the program you are running?
Of course, we have the same other programs. We are also having implementation projects. We're going to try to go to as a grassroots level as possible, and we're trying to find the most impactful issues that we can address in our program.
And what are those most important or most impactful areas?
As we all know, that the climate issues are the number one issue in all sustainable building at the moment, but this circular economy is now one of the issues that we're also addressing. We noticed that making this video that we have lots of lack of information, so it's kind of challenging to start with these issues. We don't know where we are at the moment, and we are now discussing of having some kind of information base made in our program. It's one of the issues that we are now discussing, but of course the climate is the first one that we are talking about.
And if I was a real estate CEO in the audience and I would like to do something, should I come to you, or what is the way to be part of it?
Actually, I'm just a substitute of our program. Our main coordinator, Pekka Huovila, is now in Hong Kong, where it's the biggest sustainable building conference at the moment going on. So it's we are unhappy to have these two big conferences at the same time.
But we are happy to have you here. So yes, go to Harri if you are interested in these topics. But Harri talked about information and sharing of information, and that's something Ulf also works with. Ulf Jäckel runs the program of consumer information. What does that then mean if you take a look at what Gunilla is working with the consumption side and the other programs are doing? Ulf, please.
Yeah, consumer information is important because consumption is the source of 70 to 80% of all greenhouse gases. So you have to change consumption to reach your environmental goals, which are set and which are taken seriously still. And therefore, the consumer information program addresses these kind of issues, addresses not only the government, but addresses the stakeholders, the consumers, of course, but also retailers and the industry. And it's quite logic that they are on board. How to get them on board is not that easy. You have to provide at least interesting work. For example, in in the consumer information program, we are developing and we are in a process of negotiating, or were in the process of negotiating, UN guidelines for reliable consumer information. So it's addressing target 12.8 in the SDGs, providing consumer information by 2030. We are quite early, but still it's a big task to set criteria what is reliable consumer information, and to stop greenwashing, and to find companies and associations accepting these guidelines and working with these guidelines. So that's pretty important for this program. We are also working on social aspects. We are also working on supporting or promoting the role of reliable eco-labeling schemes, type 1. If you see the ISO standards, type 1, that they cooperate and they reach a bigger market share for their products and their criteria.
Yeah, we know actually that eco-labeling has played quite a big role, for example, with refrigerators in European area, for example. How about consumer information? We know that the big software companies are kind of collecting quite a lot of information from us. And if we would take a look at who used Airbnb or Uber during last week, how many of you have been doing something like that? Yeah. And then if we asked who used Google, then it would be all of us who did that. So they are really collecting a lot of data from us. Can that kind of data be used, or does it have to do something with your program?
It's pretty difficult. Microsoft is one of our board members, but still it's difficult to use that kind of data. It's even difficult to find some information if you are using search machines, for example, when you want to buy something online, it's more or less not there. And we want to provide or find ways how we can spread the information, how we can provide the information. Even with smaller devices like a smartphone, there's not too much space. If you look at the smartphone and you want to do your shopping there, it's not that much space for additional information like sustainability information, and quite often it's not there yet. So we are working on that. That's pretty difficult, but we are working with search machines and others to ensure that.
And that's a clear message to those boardrooms that Kitty just took up. And it's also a clear message for all of us when we are saying to whom we want to share our information and the data that is collected. We should be saying, like, for sustainability purposes, yes, please use it. For other purposes, then it might be a question mark. So very interesting topics. Then we move further on very much on consumption side. What we all do, I know most of quite many of our international guests have spent weekend here in Helsinki, or at least part of the Sunday. So you have that kind of perspective, a little bit perspective of tourism to Helsinki. And about tourism, we will talk after having a little look at the video. So there we are together, and tourism is something that brings us together. Gabriele Kuhl is the one to run or be part of the tourism program. She's a journalist and also takes that kind of point of view to this question. Can you share some of the example of the implementation projects you have been doing under the program of tourism?
Yes, of course. But first, I want to tell you something about tourism. Tourism is a big sector. It accounts for 10% of the global GDP, and 1 in every 10 jobs is in tourism worldwide. And it's a very fast-growing sector. And 2016, for instance, 1.2 billion people traveled the world, and prospects for 2030 are 1.8 billion. So this sector is growing, which is good. People are traveling, people are getting to know other cultures. But how can we decouple this growth from using the resources and abusing the resources? And we know also travel has to do with airline industry, and it's one of the most unsustainable sectors in the world. And it's really a big thing how to make tourism more efficient and more sustainable. And we have several models for that, which we are implementing also. And I can tell you a little bit about the impact tourism can have on circular economy, because tourism has a lot of very, very impactful sides. For instance, tourism can be educational. It started long ago that hotels put the sign on the walls and said, take care, not use the towels every day, a new towel, or maybe we could change your bed sheets every 2 days, and they put up recycling bins, etc. So they are educating their consumers. This is a big chance. So we have here a big potential of being a role model. The thing is also that it's a direct business-to-consumer contact we have. Consumers, they have direct contact to the people who provide their holiday experience. So we can directly influence customer behavior also. We have in the consumption, in the consumer, on the consumer side, for instance, just not provide so many amenities, how to package the amenities. Why not give them open soaps and dispensers, etc. And the thing is also, you saw in this video, the 10YFP program doesn't talk about tourism as an industry. They talk about travel, about experience, about adventure. So the thing is, we have to change consumption from material consumption, like just consuming things we want to see, we want to take a picture, towards more immaterial consumption. So tourism is also a good way to promote this, to make experiences, to experience new lifestyles, to experience new cultures and countries. And the last thing is tourism can be very, very local. Because if you have a bed and breakfast or a resort, why do you have to import goods from overseas to give it to the tourists? You can just provide the local foods, local trips, local cultural, I don't know, things that you provide to the tourists. So this is a great potential we have, and we have to change it from the material consumption to the immaterial.
And on practical level, how to engage into your program, or as a case example, what have you been doing under this program?
Well, I'm representing Future Camp. This is a company and a non-profit company, actually, promoting sustainable lifestyles. We are doing workshops in Zurich right now, but we also have many tourist programs. We have, for instance, a hotel project in Greece, which is being built right now. And we kind of implement circular economic models from the beginning of planning, of construction, and implementation. So we try to really, before we set up this resort, we think about how to use less materials, how to use only circular materials. And it's a huge challenge. It took us a lot of time. We worked with universities, and we're still not there yet, but I can tell you about good examples in tourism.
And we will go on with those examples on the table discussions after. But if you happen to have an idea, or if you are the one who runs something dealing with tourism, be in touch with Gabrielle. And then we have the last area, not the smallest one, I would say, neither. It's the food and agriculture. And Martin Rohn is the one to be representing that. She comes from Swiss Federal Office for the Environment, presenting Sustainable Food System Program. If you take a look at, after all of these important things, one point of view to food and agriculture, how is that program working?
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting also Switzerland. Switzerland is co-leading this program with South Africa and also with WWF and IROS. Switzerland is very committed to green economy at the national level, but also at the international level, because more than 70% of our footprint is abroad. So we are committed to the 10YFP program from the beginning, designing also this 10YFP program. Now, with the food system, the presentation made by Kitty was a very good introduction to the subject food system, sustainable food system. On the one hand, food system contribute to environmental challenges with land degradation, deforestation, water pollution. But food system is also affected by environmental challenges, climate change, water scarcity. So the link is very strong. We heard more than 800 million people go hungry. More than 2 billion people are still malnourished. And at the same time, 30% is what you presented, Kitty, more than 30% of food is lost or wasted all over the world. And we also know that the planet has to have the capacity and should have the capacity to provide food and good food to everybody. But how to do that? And we need, we saw that, we discussed it also, we need to bring our consumption and production patterns to operate within planetary boundaries. It's a must. And it is a holistic approach which has been taken by this program of the 10YFP, looking through all the value chain and all the sector involved in the food system, agriculture, but also tourism and information to the public. And what do we do concretely? Because it is a nice word. So we had 8 initiatives, a core initiative, and I will just to speak about 2 of them. One is conducted by Nestlé, UNEP, WWF, FAO, and it is to develop the methodology, harmonized methodology to define and to count what is food waste and how could we implement the SDGs with this methodology. And the second program is a multi-stakeholder roundtable to have all on the same table to develop policies, but also good practices, and to have this exchange. And last but not least, what is the added value for you to join this program? The added value is to be part of the solution, to be a small partner, but to be on board, to have this dialogue possibility, and to implement concrete action on the ground. So welcome to our program.
That's it. And this is how you can engage to these programs. And now I ask each of you in 10 seconds, take Kitty's challenge and from your own life, tell something in your own field. What is something you are already doing or something that is a little bit nicely good in your own field? And then after we go to these roundtable discussions. But while you are thinking a little bit, just to remind you that these 10 years framework programs are working all over the world. So it's countries from south and from north, it's companies, it's academics, it's NGOs from south and north who can be part of these programs. And they have been working for 4.5 years now, and they have others and a little bit more to go on. So if you have an idea how to be part of it, how to become part of this movement, please be really in touch and engage during this discussion. And now we take a fast round of some examples from your own life. And if we take it vice versa, so if Martin would start.
So food waste, before I'm going shopping, I open the fridge and I look, what do I still have in my fridge?
Very good tip. Many of us don't do that. Gabrielle.
Consuming less. I haven't consumed a lot last year, and I'm going zero waste in my personal life, and we're doing these projects for hotels also. Yeah.
Zero waste goal in personal life. Not bad, I would say. Ulf.
I use a smartphone, a Blue Angel labeled smartphone, because I want the design of smartphones to be changed.
Cool. Harry.
I live in a 150 years old building that I've been renovating now 50 years. And I haven't demolished anything that is not necessary.
So you don't need more materials as you have that. Great. Mark?
It's quite simple for me. With sustainable public procurement, the best thing to do is actually not to buy at all, so buy less.
So you are doing the same then with Gabrielle. And Gunilla?
Yes, I try to reuse things and repair.
Repair and reuse. Practical notes, 6 of them, and I'm quite sure 0 of us does all of those, so there is something good for all of us. Let's give a warm hand applause for all of the panelists. And then straight away we move to the table discussions, and I think this is quite easy for those who are already sitting around tables. For the rest of you in the back, I have 2 suggestions. You either come to one of these tables, so there you can take, for example, chairs here to the front. The numbering starts from here, number 1, and it goes around until 11. And for the rest of you in the back, it's just best to take 3 of your friends around you, pick one of the topics and start to talk about that. Create interesting topics in which you would like to discuss. So if you cannot fit into a table, don't hesitate to do your own roundtable discussion behind there. And let's have hands up all the chairs of the tables. Chairs of the tables. Does it look like that there is one in each table? Yes, it looks like that. That's great. And these people will help you to start, and these people will make sure that you come back with one tweet after your half-an-hour discussion. Please go on, have a beautiful discussion from these topics.
Yes,
Hey, dear friends, this is 5 minutes warning. 5 minutes warning. I know. Then you will have 1.5 days to go on, but this time 5 minutes. Dear friends, it's the last minute, and we are expecting the tweets. If you have troubles in getting to this web address, which is screen.io/demos, make your hands up. There are Jenny and Kati who will come to help you. Hands up if you are in trouble. Otherwise, you have a minute to go. You just go take one phone or something else and go to that web address and write it down there. So then we have all of them there on the table. There should be an internet connection that is available.
Yeah.
Yeah, screen.io/demos. And there you just write it down. If it doesn't work, hands up.
myös twiittaa sitten ne muut, jotka saa pyydä kommentteja. Mutta miten me saataisiin ne kerättyä, että meillä olisi sitten joku 11 twiittiä niin kuin tavallaan sitä loppusessioon varten. Että
pitää vaan nyt twiitata jonkun meidän esimerkiksi Hyömän tililtä tai...
Joo, niin voisi ja katsoa, tähän tulee sitten. Eikö tämä rakentaa aika nopeasti tämä?
Me voidaan ottaa se, Kati voi tuossa suoraan lähettää.
Niin katso, että voisi katsoa, että voisin esimerkiksi tämän välissä. Niin.
Hey, it starts to be time to wrap up. I know we could have spent this whole 2 days in discussing on these tables because it has been interesting, I can see, and inspiring, I can see, and probably knowledgeable also, I can see. We already have some table outcomes there on the wall, and while the rest are sending theirs, I will just ask like 2 comments from the tables, and this table number 7 seems to be my first address. Discuss going and going. Still, I am going to interrupt Zinat. And it's about buildings, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. What was the main or something very interesting from your table?
I think that there's been a lot of stuff that's come out on the table, and I'm only going to say keywords. Yeah, the first keyword has been on maintaining the intrinsic value of materials and ensuring that they are up in a higher value in the building chain. The second important thing is to constantly examine what resources we are losing or what resources we can reuse within the value chain as we go on from choosing in the site all the way up to the end of the life and back into the building system. And the third, I think, was an issue of looking at business models for getting our materials into the cycle. Yeah.
Thank you so much. 3 easy steps, I think. 3 steps that will need a lot of work to do, but are exactly straight to the point there. Then I know here in behind we had an extra group, and as that was something so special, I wanted to ask Amanda, what was the biggest highlight of your edition?
We're the extra group. Yes, we talked about consumer information and how to reach consumers. So with what sort of information and how do you inform and where? And well, there was a wealth of different perspectives, and it was a really good discussion, so very short time. But I think the main points were when informing consumers about sustainable, well, choices and lifestyles, it's important, obviously, to be positive, to let them know that any little change, wherever it might be in food or in clothing or whatever you're consuming, any little incremental change is a positive thing. So you can't be telling people what to do. And the second thing that was interesting, I thought, was that it was proven that there's actually different mediums to do that. It's not always just the social media campaign, and that it could actually be very efficient to have actually a paper leaflet or a book that you can refer to back every while. I think that was it. Thanks.
2 very practical steps. Be positive and give good feedback. You remember that thing that people would like to get 9 positive feedbacks and then they are ready for 1 negative or 1 challenging. So that was a very good point. Also using different kind of mediums on this topic. Very good ones. Thank you so much for all of you on the tables. The table chairs will report or get the documentation back to their work. I hope there were some meaningful relations built. I hope there were some ideas of, okay, I have these sources and you had those. Those can be probably make something together. And I hope you have opportunities to go on with these discussions. And here we have all the 12 tweets. They are at the moment only here on the wall. You can have a look at, but we will also tweet them to the conference hashtag. So make sure you retweet your own. So then we will have it. And you can also from the chairs, please use them. They are material for that kind of campaign work that the group in back shared with us. So here we are. Guess what? We are heading further. But before that, two announcements. First one is that Kitty's presentation will be on the conference webpage. There were several people coming to us being like, we should have it. Is it possible? And she has said, yes, it is possible. So in the conference webpage in a couple of days, it should be there. And the second one is that as we are now in Finland, there is this Citizens Climate Pledge initiative, which is also signed or taken into account by UN, and the head of that pledge asked me to promote it. Like, if you have been feeling, you have a little bit that feeling that I should do more. The very, very small step to do that is to go to the Citizens Climate Pledge website and sign it, because that's the way to show support to the climate action. And as we know at the moment, the globe needs that support because there is also some unsupport going on. So probably that's an easy to do that. Otherwise, it's time to say thank you. Thank you for your great collaboration. Thank you for a great event. And let's hope this is a starting point for a great discussion for these 1.5 days you have in front of you. Hopefully you can use these relationships you have been able to create, because typically, like, you know, in conferences, it's not what happens in the sessions, but it is what happens between and after the sessions. So use that time also for these topics. Thank you for 10 YFP, thank you for Sitra, and thank you for Ministry for Environment. Thank you.